Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do some nice controversial stuff and get right into it. We're going to be talking about gender dysphoria, the trans community, and really where hormone therapy, therapy to stop puberty from happening in adolescence, where it fits in that puzzle, blah, blah, blah. If you don't know what this topic is, there's a newish type of therapy where you use hormone blockers so that adolescents don't go through puberty if they don't identify with the sex that they were born, if they're suffering from gender dysphoria. Usually when I hear people speaking against this, because I am against this, it's from an anti-trans perspective and really not helpful to the discussion. I haven't really seen anyone pro-transgender folks talk on the issue. So here I am. Let's get into it. All right, let's first see what the quote-unquote professionals say on the issue. If you were just to search or look into this topic yourself, what would you find? What does the Mayo Clinic say? Well, the Mayo Clinic tells you what puberty blockers do. They stop primary and secondary sex characteristics from happening. The benefits of doing this would be improved mental well-being, reduce depression and anxiety, improve social interactions and integration with other kids, eliminate the need for future surgeries, reduce thoughts and actions related to self-harm. Sounds pretty good so far. Criteria for use, making sure there's a thorough investigation before we just go into it. That's responsible. Are the changes permanent? They say it doesn't cause permanent changes and you can undo it at any time. Sounding good. And they said puberty begins around 10 to 11, some start earlier, and they're saying pretty much as soon as you start puberty, you should be doing this. We'll get into this a little bit more later. What are the side effects and complications? That'd be something I'd be concerned with, right? Oh, just, swelling, weight gain, hot flashes, headaches, and maybe bone density issues and future fertility. Okay, so we got some side effects, but nothing really that bad, right? Let's see what references they use here. They referred themselves. That's always a bad sign. Let's talk about something when you're looking at something like the Mayo Clinic. In case you didn't know, money drives the medical industry, and what gives you more money is having people do this rather than not. In fact, this type of therapy is one of the most expensive things that you could do right now because it's so new. So, of course, the Mayo Clinic's going to push it. They make money off of it. They have ulterior motives to cite themselves as a source and then distort the other sources that they're using. When you're looking at a topic like this, you need to actually go to the source of the source, right? You have to see what actual professionals say. What are the actual risks then? This is from an actual, article, scholarly article, something that would be put into a cited source. So these are the primary counter arguments to hormone therapy that the Mayo Clinic has left out. Tanner stage, this is what we're talking about, stages of puberty. 2 or 3, individual is not sufficiently mature or authentically free to take such a decision. Now, this is already assuming that you wouldn't start hormone block therapy at stage 1. Unfortunately, the Mayo Clinic kind of implied that that would be okay. And we'll get into more of all the reasons that that's really fucked up later. But let's keep going. It is not possible to make certain diagnosis of gender dysphoria, GD, in adolescence because in this phase, gender identity is still fluctuating. In other words, you're trying to solve a problem you don't know is actually there yet. Moreover, puberty suppression may inhibit spontaneous formation of consistent gender identity, which sometimes develops through the crisis of gender. We are going to talk about that a lot more in a minute. Early somatic treatment may be premature and inappropriate. Again, that's going on the same thing as number 3. We're really going to hammer into that in a moment. Research about the effects of early interventions on the development of bone and mass growth, which the Mayo Clinic did mention. Typical events of hormonal puberty and on brain development still limited. So we can't know the long-term effects on a large number of cases. So what the scientists are saying is when you say there aren't long-term effects, you can't intellectually say that because we don't know all of the long-term effects. We have a handful of them. We know that there are some already. Although current research suggests that there are no effects on social, emotional, and school functioning, which is very true, potential effects may be too subtle to observe during follow-up sessions by clinical assessment alone. So they're saying we don't see any, but there might be some. The impact on sexuality has not yet been studied. That's a big red flag. But the restriction of sexual appetite brought about by blockers may prevent the adolescent from having age-appropriate socio-sexual experiences. In other words, because you skip puberty, even if you try to resume it, you might not have a sex drive for the rest of your life. In light of this fact, early interventions may interfere with patients' development of a free sexuality and may limit their exploration of sexual orientation. Whoops. And finally, for trans girls, natal boys with female gender identification, in case you don't know, trans girls means born as a boy. The blockage of phallic growth may result in less genital tissue available for an optimal vaginoplasty. We're going to talk about that too. This is a big list of problems, like a really bad glossing over by the Mayo Clinic. And this isn't something that's like a right-wing propaganda site or anything, because again, I'm pro-transgender, and we'll talk about that more in a moment and how that plays into this. This is the science. There's something really big that we need to talk about in these sections. So if we look at an overview of gender and sexuality development, you will find that according to prospective research on trajectories of childhood gender variance, gender dysphoria, it desists, it stops during early adolescence in the majority of youth. That means that they will often identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, more often than heterosexual, but they will no longer have gender dysphoria after puberty. Now, herein lies the problem. If you're stopping puberty, you are literally stopping the thing that cures most people of gender dysphoria. And I say cure for a reason here. Now, before we get into that, we're talking, according to research done in 2015, 60 to 80% of people with gender dysphoria no longer have it after puberty. Why is that important and why is that a good thing? Well, because you don't want to have gender dysphoria. It's not a positive thing. It is a mental illness with actual impact. How do I know this? Suicide rates. 14% of adolescents who suffer from gender dysphoria have suicide attempts, not suicidal thoughts, suicide attempts. Compare that to 2.7% of the major population. So you're talking about a ridiculous increase, almost a tenfold increase of likelihood that you will try to commit suicide if you have gender dysphoria. And that's not just from social stigmas. That's been studied before. Just so you know, not everything is about a society oppressing you. It's actually quite disturbing and quite terrible for someone to feel and know that they are living inside a body that doesn't match their mental state. That is very distressing. To be dysphoric and this weird push as if it's like this great thing is not healthy. It's something you need to treat and deal with, not something you wish upon someone. Nobody wants to be in the wrong body. How this is treated as a good thing is beyond idiotic. So if puberty is the best known cure for this, you let puberty happen. But let's talk about the other issue. Let's talk about surgery. It alluded to in the Mayo Clinic and the other thing that you might have a problem with reassignment surgery going forward if you're a transgendered woman. In other words, a man transitioning into a woman, for those of you that don't understand trans terms. Transgender surgery is argued. Many studies will show that it improves quality of life. I tend to think that these studies are probably more accurate because they've been done more recently. However, I do think it is important to note that the most thorough ever done research on transition therapy, it's a 30-year, the most people ever used, like this was from the 70s till 2003. This is the magnum opus of research on transition surgery, showed that it actually hurt rather than helped. I think that might have a lot to do with the timeline, like the 70s and some social stigma, but it could be that this stuff doesn't help. But most other research has indicated better quality of life and lower suicide rate. So I am usually, as long as the person's very well aware of what they're doing, I'm usually in pretty well support of someone doing transition therapy if they're a grown adult wanting to do that. But the reason I even bring this up is because when you use puberty blockers, as alluded to earlier, transgender girls, they won't be able to get a normal vaginoplasty. What that means is they say you could do alternative treatments, but it's not going to work. Basically, when you are doing these hormone blockers for someone who has gender dysphoria, what we know you are doing, aside from the side effects we're not sure about yet, what we know for a fact you are doing is you are, one, removing the natural process which cures, and I will use the word cure because nobody wants to have gender dysphoria. So you are removing the cure to the dysphoria, the best known cure. You're taking it away. Furthermore, someone who will stay dysphoric after adolescence, the only thing we know that has shown any sort of consistent reliability in helping is gender reassignment surgery, which we don't even know that for sure, but it seems to be more helpful than not in most research. You're also removing the ability for transgendered women to have that surgery the same way that someone else will. So not only are you stopping them from having a chance to explore their sexuality, to be sexual later in life, to have normal functioning fucking bones, but then if they do stay dysphoric after their puberty resumes, they're not even going to be able to have successful transition surgery. They're going to have to do all sorts of weird stuff, and it's never going to be quite the same as if they had gone through puberty naturally. If you are an advocate for a transgendered individual, someone who has gender dysphoria, rather than an advocate for your own wallet for how much this sort of treatment costs, Mayo Clinic, you stupid sacks of shit, if you don't have your wallet in this conversation, you're going to know real quick that if you care for the trans community, you don't want this shit going through. You want them to have a chance to develop their sexuality naturally, to let their brain develop naturally, to not have long-term effects we don't know yet, to not have issues with bone development, and if they decide to transition later in life, to be able to do so normally rather than have limitations because of these stupid blockers. It is an open and closed case. All you have to do is spend a couple minutes looking into the actual science behind this, and you'll find the people pushing this, everyone you see pushing this is in one of two categories. One, they're trying to virtue signal to be greater than the next person. Or two, they're getting paid to push it. That is it. Hard stop. Otherwise, these are sick people that are doing the most damage to the trans community than has ever been done in the history of humanity, and I am sick of it. I am an advocate for rights to all people. I'm not an anti-trans bullshit artist that's out there, and I could still call shit when I see it, and this is shit. This has to stop. And until next time, I scheme, you scheme, we all scheme for ice cream. Fuck the Mayo Clinic. Bye.